On November 3, 1998, Joshua Earl Patrick Phillips walked into the darkest chapter of his life. He was born in 1984 in Allentown, Pennsylvania. His parents were Steve and Melissa "Missy" Phillips. In 1997, they moved to Jacksonville, Florida. Steve had a drinking problem. He was strict, angry, and disliked having young girls in the house. He set harsh rules for Josh. To outsiders, Josh seemed quiet and polite. Teachers said he was average at school. He had never caused trouble. But at home, things were different. Josh lived in fear of his father's temper. His mother sensed something was off, especially with how Steve acted around girls, but she didn't know how deep it went. Josh had 2 older half-brothers in Pennsylvania, but after the move, contact faded. The family kept birds and a beagle. Josh took care of them. Life looked normal, but inside the home, pressure built. He still had friends. He often played with 8-year-old Maddie Clifton and her sister Jessie, who lived nearby. On November 3, 1998, Josh and Maddie were outside playing with a baseball. He said the ball hit her in the eye. She screamed. She was hurt. Josh panicked. If anyone saw her like that, he feared what his father would do. He dragged Maddie inside, struck her with a bat to quiet her, then shoved her under his waterbed. Believing she was still, he left the room and later joined his family's search efforts when his dad came home. When Josh heard noises again, he removed the mattress. Using a sharp tool, he wounded her throat. Then he struck her, aiming at chest and abdomen several times. He pushed her back under the mattress, sure she would stay silent. Maddie's body remained there for 7 days, while Josh and his family joined the public search. On November 10th, Melissa discovered her hidden by a leak in the waterbed. The medical report noted 3 heavy impact wounds and a cut to her throat as likely fatal, plus 9 additional wounds afterward. In Josh's room, investigators found the bat and the tool hidden behind a dresser, red-stained shoes and strong air fresheners, clear signs he had tried to hide what happened. That night, Josh had watched disturbing videos online. He'd also stashed a phone and prank items in a neighbor's home before, suggesting troubling patterns. A psychological evaluation revealed damage to his frontal lobe, which can impair judgment and self-control. His defense said he acted in panic, not planning the harm. The state argued it was a planned act, driven by personal motive and aimed at covering up what happened. Josh was tried as an adult in Polk County, Florida, starting on July 6, 1999. The trial lasted 2 days. His lawyer called no witnesses and focused on the idea of a panicked accident. On August 26, 1999, a jury found him guilty of a first-degree serious offense. He was sentenced to life in prison without the chance of release. In 2012, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that automatic life without review for minors was unconstitutional. That led to a resentencing hearing in June 2017. The judge acknowledged Josh's potential for growth, but said the act was deliberate, harsh, and carefully concealed. The life term remained, yet Josh became eligible for a sentence review after serving 25 years, which occurred in 2023. In June 2025, at age 41, Josh asked to delay his review hearing. That request is still pending. The next man said he'd changed, but the moment he walked free, everything spiraled. Reginald McFaten was born in 1953 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He was one of 10 siblings. Home was chaotic. His father left early. Not long after, his mother moved in with a man named James Woods. Woods beat the children with an electric cord. Reginald escaped when he could. He spent most of his time at his grandmother's. Her place felt safer than home. He dropped out of school as a teenager. The streets became his classroom. Reginald and his brothers, Gordon and Victor, joined a gang. Trouble followed fast. By December 1969, Reginald had been arrested 17 times. The charges kept stacking up: petty theft, break-ins, and more. On the night of December 7, 1969, 16-year-old Reginald and 3 teenage friends broke into the apartment of 66-year-old Sonia Rosenbaum in Winfield. They tied her up and covered her mouth. They demanded money and forced her to show where she kept her cash and jewelry. They took about $20 and left her under a blanket. She suffocated and lost her life. The police found them soon after. Reginald was trying to climb out of a bedroom window when officers arrived. His mother stood by, trying to help him escape. Inside the home, officers found Rosenbaum's jewelry and over $600 in cash that he could not explain. He was arrested on December 11, 1969. The charges included first-degree unlawful taking of life, burglary, aggravated theft, larceny, and conspiracy. During his arrest, he was read his rights in front of his mother. He first denied any involvement, Later, he admitted he had covered Rosenbaum's mouth. He said some details did not match what his friends said. His trial began in 1970. His own words and witness accounts led to a conviction for first-degree unlawful taking of life and the other charges. The court gave him a life sentence without any chance of early release. He appealed in 1974. He argued that police had forced him to confess. The state's highest court agreed there were some mistakes in procedure. But the judges said those mistakes did not overturn his conviction. He faced a retrial. Once again, he was found guilty and given life without release. While in prison, he earned a high school diploma. He also completed college courses in psychology and tree care. He stayed out of trouble for 8 years before his requests for release began. He filed for a reduction in his sentence many times. In 1992, the parole board voted 4-1 to cut his term. Governor Robert Casey Sr. approved the change in March 1994. McFaten walked free on July 7, 1994. He moved to New York under strict supervision. He lived in a halfway house and did odd jobs. But less than 3 months later, everything spiraled. He began a brutal series of offenses across 2 states. On September 6, 1994, he forced 42-year-old Robert Silk into his car near Elmont, New York. He went physical on Silk until he passed and left his body in a creek. A few weeks later, he met 55-year-old Jaime Brown in Nyack, New York. He forced her into his car, took her money, and held her for hours. She survived, but was left deeply shaken. Days after that, he met 78-year-old Margaret Curer. He made her get into his car. He wounded her with a sharp tool, cut off her air supply, and took her belongings. She did not survive. Police tracked him through ATM withdrawals made on the victim's bank cards. Surveillance cameras showed him using the cards. On October 6, 1994, officers arrested him. They found jewelry from the victims in his possession. He stood trial in New York in August 1995. He was convicted of theft, armed theft, and harm for what he did to Brown. The court gave him 37.5 to 75 years. In September, he admitted guilt in ending Curer's life. He told his lawyer, "Get it over with." In March 1996, he received 2 more life sentences, each with at least 25 years before any review. Up next are 2 brothers who turned their anger on the family that tried to save them. Their motive is mind-bending. Brian and David grew up in a close Jehovah's Witness family in Salisbury Township, Lehigh County, Pennsylvania. Brian was born in 1978. David was born in 1979. They were the 2 oldest of 3 brothers. Their youngest brother, Eric, was 11. Their father, Dennis, cleaned the local high school. Their mother, Brenda, often worried about her older sons. By early 1995, both teens had turned away from their family faith. They cut their hair short. They wore combat-style clothes. They embraced extreme ideas. Brian had Berserker tattooed on his forehead. David had Sieg Heil inked above his eyebrows. Their parents began to feel unsafe at home. Brenda reached out for help. She called psychologists and the police. She signed the boys up for counseling and anti-skinhead classes. They refused every intervention. Brian once threatened the family car. Police visited their home 5 times between 1993 and 1995. Brian spent time in a psychiatric ward. David went to juvenile treatment for substance issues. Days before what happened next, Brian was suspended from school for drawing hateful sketches in his notebook. On February 26, 1995, late in the evening, the brothers and their cousin Ben, age 18, walked in after a movie. Their house was on Erritz Lane. Inside, they confronted their mother, Brenda. Brian covered her mouth with underwear. Then he used a kitchen blade to inflict repeated wounds on her at the staircase. Upstairs, Dennis slept. David and Ben entered his room. They swung a metal baseball bat and an exercise bar until he did not wake. 11-year-old Eric slept in the next room. In his bed, he was struck many times with a heavy pickaxe handle. He could not defend himself. Afterwards, the 3 searched the house. They found a 12-gauge shotgun. They loaded it, then drove off in Brenda's 1988 Pontiac convertible. 3 days later, police tracked them to Michigan at a friend's home. They were taken into custody. At their hearings, Brian admitted responsibility for Brenda's passing. David admitted responsibility for Dennis's passing. Ben was later held responsible for Dennis's passing based on DNA from a t-shirt. No one was ever held responsible for what happened to Eric. In April 1996, all 3 received mandatory terms that will last for the rest of their lives. At that time, Pennsylvania law allowed no exceptions for young offenders in fatal cases. In February 2024, nearly 29 years later, a Supreme Court ruling offered a small chance of hope. On February 21st, 2024, Brian, now 46, and David, now 45, were sentenced. They each received terms of 60 years to life. That makes them eligible to request release in 2055, when they will be in their 70s. During the resentencing hearing, Brian wept openly. He said, "Everyone deserves a safe, happy life without danger and pain. I took that away from my family and my neighborhood. I would give anything to bring my family back and ease their suffering." He spoke of his faith and his wish to see his family again, apologize, and ask for forgiveness. David's lawyer argued that David had followed his brother's lead. This raised a question. Was David fully to blame, or was he under Brian's influence? Up next is One Night, One Choice, a life sentence for a 14-year-old. Queed Batts came into this world as the child of two teenagers in Pennsylvania. He moved through foster homes for much of his childhood. Nothing felt steady or safe for him back then. By age 14, his life changed in a way he could never undo. In 2007, he and another teen set out to take money and belongings from a pier. During the confrontation, someone fired a gun. The other teen lost his life that night. Queed was the one holding the gun. A life was ended, and his own life took a turn he could not reverse. Experts who study cases like his point to many factors: broken family connections, the strain of foster care, and friends who treated aggressive acts as normal. Could a stronger support system have helped him choose differently? We can't know for sure, but on that night he pulled the trigger. He was tried as an adult in Northampton County. The judge found him guilty of first-degree homicide. Under Pennsylvania law at the time, anyone convicted at that level faced one outcome: life in prison with no chance to leave. On October 22, 2007, at just 14 years old, Queed was given that sentence. He became one of the youngest people in the nation to receive it. That punishment didn't allow the court to weigh his youth, his background, or the possibility he could grow and change. It treated him the same as an adult offender. His case later helped reshape the rules. In 2012, the U.S. Supreme Court said it was wrong to automatically give children life terms without letting judges consider their age and capacity to change. Courts had to look at each young person's situation, not just hand down the toughest sentence. In 2016, that decision was made retroactive, affecting cases already decided. In 2017, Pennsylvania's highest court agreed that Batts' sentence should be revisited. They said he deserved a fresh hearing. In that hearing, prosecutors had to prove he was beyond help. That is a high bar. Today, he remains behind bars, but he now has a real chance at a different outcome. His new sentence could be for a set number of years with a possibility of release afterward. He could also appeal if he feels the decision is unfair. What will decide his future? Judges will look at how young he was, the hardships he faced, how he has behaved in prison, and what evidence shows about who he has become. Can a boy sentenced as an adult demonstrate that he no longer poses a danger? That question is exactly what the law now requires them to ask. Now, what happens when a 15-year-old tries to erase what he's done? In fire. February, 15-year-old Warner Batty Jr. stepped into a moment he could never undo. He was a black teenager from Philadelphia. He was born in 1960 and grew up in a working-class neighborhood. Details about his family are sparse. Court reports describe a youth who often seemed lost and without much direction. He had run into trouble before, but never faced a serious charge until that winter. On the night of February 1st, 1975, Warner and a friend, Donald Rivera, lured 26-year-old Betty Marie Ilgenfritz Bradford into an empty house. Things spiraled very quickly. Both teens began a brutal beating. They struck her over and over until she lay still. Then Batty set her body on fire. It was an act of extreme cruelty. The court later suggested they did this to hide any signs of what they had done. The real reason for their actions remains a chilling mystery. Two young teens, barely out of grade school, made a choice that ended in irreversible tragedy. In that moment, it seemed as if hurting someone else might offer a way out. But what followed was fire and the loss of Betty's life. Warner was arrested on February 6th in York, Pennsylvania. By November 25th, 1975, he stood before a judge as a 15-year-old facing a charge of unlawfully ending a life. He pled guilty. A hearing in April 1976 confirmed that he was responsible for both first and second-degree homicide. The judge gave him a sentence of life behind bars with no chance to ever leave. The judge explained that the beating and the fire showed a refusal to take responsibility. He said the cruelty destroyed any hope for Warner's future. He hoped the sentence would serve as a warning to others. In the years since, courts have questioned whether someone so young should ever stay locked up forever. In 2012, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that locking a minor away for life without any review was too harsh. That decision changed things across the country. In Pennsylvania, Warner used that ruling to ask for a new look at his case. He filed under the state's Post-Conviction Relief Act. He argued that recent Supreme Court decisions should apply to him. On June 6, 2017, at age 53, he was given a new sentence in York County. He received 50 years to life, with credit for more than 42 years he had already spent in prison. Even with that change, Warner remains behind bars. His team asked if a 50-to-life term was allowed for someone whose act happened before 2012. A higher court ruled that it was legal and within the judge's power. We have no record of any final words from Warner at his resentencing. There is no note of an apology or regret. There is no splashy statement in the papers, only legal filings and appeal records. After more than 4 decades locked away, one question remains. Can a teenager's worst act ever be balanced by time? The courts have yet to settle it. The next teens said their counselor was too strict. What happened next left a man gone and 3 boys running. Dwayne M Morning grew up in York, Pennsylvania. By his mid-teens, he had already run away from home several times. He was placed at the York Children's Home. That facility cares for young people who struggle at home. Court records show he had prior run-ins with local police. He ignored efforts by his parents and various agencies to help him change. Details about his family life are scarce outside courtroom transcripts. His mother stood by him. She even spoke in his favor during court proceedings. After being informed of his rights, Dwayne asked to speak with her before answering further questions. On the night of June 18, 1988, Dwayne was just under 16 years old. He and 2 other residents planned to target their counselor, 23-year-old Batty. The boys felt Batty was too strict and wanted to take his belongings and end his life. Dwayne and 17-year-old Miguel Yoder entered Batty's room together. They carried blades. Batty suffered at least 21 separate wounds. 14-year-old Michael Lehman stayed by the door. He kept watch in case someone approached. Afterward, the 3 fled to Harrisburg. There, they left behind their blades and stained clothes. They used the stolen cash to buy bus tickets back to York. Police arrested them the following day. At his 1990 trial, Dwayne faced charges for the serious incident, theft, breaking in, and planning it all. His defense focused on his age and influence by peers. They argued he could not be helped in juvenile court and needed adult proceedings. Testimony revealed anger at Batty's strict rules and strong peer pressure as motives. Still, the plan was prearranged. Climb through a second-floor window and go straight to Batty's room. During questioning, officers reminded him of his rights 3 separate times. He then gave a recorded statement, admitting that he, Yoder, and Lehman had wounded Batty with blades. The court ruled that his statement was made freely and with full understanding. The jury found Dwayne guilty on all counts. In 1990, he received life without any chance of early release for the fatal count. He also got consecutive terms for theft and breaking in, adding years on top of his life sentence. He appealed in 1991, but the court denied his request. Judges rejected his claim that his confession was forced and that he should have stayed in juvenile court. In 2017, after new rulings on youth sentencing, Pennsylvania reviewed cases like his. Dwayne was given a new term of 46 years to life. That makes him eligible to seek release around 2043, when he would be about 70 years old. The next teen wanted peace. Instead, he left behind chaos, a fake break-in, and a handwritten note. Before we move on to the next case, consider subscribing for more stories like his. M Mazifa was born Richard Mazifa. He was 17 when he entered his grandparents' living room in Warrington Township, Pennsylvania. His mother had ended her own life when he was about 3. He later said he faced mistreatment during those early years. In time, he moved in with his grandparents, hoping for stability and support. His grandfather welcomed him, but over the years, Brian grew distant. He carried quiet anger, unresolved grief, and a deep sense of isolation. Tensions built behind the scenes. On July 14, 1986, he went into the garage, picked up a shotgun, and loaded it with birdshot. Then he stepped into the living room and pulled the trigger, firing at both grandparents. There was no warning, no explanation. Afterward, he tried to cover it up. He cut out his grandfather's wallet, turned up the volume on the TV, and scattered jewelry to make it look like a break-in. Then he called for help, crying, shaken, and pretending it had all just happened. After police talked with him for hours, he left a handwritten note. When asked why he did it, he wrote, "Because 17 years of really stinks." Those words showed how much pain he was in. At trial, the court saw a young person crushed by trauma and feeling betrayed by the only family he had. He did not offer any other reason. The judge handed down life sentences to run back to back with no chance for release. Over the next 30 years, Brian changed. He read books, learned chess, and kept a clean record inside. A psychologist tested his high IQ and said he could live on the outside safely. In 2012 and 2016, the U.S. Supreme Court decided that teens couldn't automatically get life without the chance to seek release. Pennsylvania reviewed those cases. On July 3, 2018, Judge Ray Boylan heard Brian's story again. She noted his age at the time, what he endured, and his behavior in prison. She replaced his sentences with terms that run at the same time, each up to life, but made him eligible for release in 13 years. At that hearing, Brian spoke with calm honesty. He said he was no longer the angry teen he once was. He called his younger self cruel, selfish, and heartless. He said his grandparents deserved to grow old with family around them, not to have their lives ended by him. "I regret every part of the harm I caused," he said. "I feel ashamed." He also shared this. "I wait for time to pass when the only mark I have made on this world is a scar. I hope that my life can count for more." Those words showed a level of reflection no one expected from him back in 1986. Now what happens when the fear of punishments leads to 3 people gone? Donald Zuller grew up in Brighton Heights, a neighborhood in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He was born in 1972. He lived with his family next door to the victims at 3509 Simon Avenue. Neighbors remembered a quiet boy. Nothing hinted at what would happen later. On April 14, 1986, something terrible broke the calm of Brighton Heights. That evening, 14-year-old Zuller took a small weapon and entered the home of his elderly neighbors, 78-year-old Edward Kalberer, his 75-year-old wife Mary, and Mary's 93-year-old mother Ann Jacobs. Edward had seen Zuller earlier disposing of stolen items. Zuller panicked. He used the sharp object on Edward, who did not survive. As Edward lay dying, Mary and Ann discovered his body. Fearing they would tell, Zuller turned on them too. Both women also did not survive. In minutes, 3 lives had ended. For someone so young, the act was shocking. Why did he go so far? Zuller later said he was terrified of punishment. He wanted to avoid being caught. His fear led to a brutal choice. When police found the 3 bodies, they traced stolen belongings back to Zuller. He was taken in for questioning. There, he admitted everything. In 1987, Zuller appeared in Allegheny County Court. Prosecutors described a planned act meant to hide what he had done. The defense did not dispute the facts. They asked the judge to consider his age. Still, the court treated the case as the most serious offense under state law. Zuller was found guilty on 3 counts of first-degree charges. The judge gave him 3 life terms in a row. He would never be free again. The courtroom was silent as the judge spoke. Zuller, only a child when it happened, was now sealed away in the adult prison system. Years later, changes in Supreme Court rulings on juvenile life terms brought his case back. In April 2017, an Allegheny County judge held a new hearing. By then, Zuller was 45. He had become a Christian inside prison walls. He showed regret for what he did. His lawyers asked for a shorter sentence. Victims' families spoke too. Mary Jenkins, daughter of Edward and Mary, said her parents never got a chance to find faith. Their loss was permanent. The judge noted Zuller's good behavior and remorse. He then reduced the punishment to 75 years to life. That's less than the original 3 life terms, but still a very long time. Under this ruling, Zuller will remain confined until old age, with only a slim hope of release far in the future. The next teenager was adopted into a respected family, but by 17 he had helped destroy it from the inside. Michael Lee Bourgeois was born on April 14, 1984 in Pennsylvania. He was adopted as a baby and grew up in Ephrata, Lancaster County. His adoptive parents, Lucy and Terry Smith, were well respected. Lucy was an elementary school principal and Terry ran a local business. From the outside, their home looked calm and safe. As a teenager, Michael started spending time with a group of peers who would lead him down a dark path. By the time he reached his mid-teens, he was hanging out with Landon May, Stephen Estes, and Drenea Rodriguez. In September 2001, the 4 of them carried out a plan to break into the Smith home. They said they were there to steal items, but once inside, things changed. Michael and Landon forced Lucy and Terry to the floor. They used duct tape to bind their hands and feet. What began as theft became a brutal ordeal. Lucy was shot, then pierced more than 50 times, beaten with a television set, and finally smothered. Terry went through similar horror, wounded 47 times, shot 5 times, and deprived of air. The medical reports show the horror lasted for hours. Lucy also suffered a violation before she was suffocated. Their final moments were filled with fear and pain. At trial, Michael admitted he had come up with the plan. When asked why he harmed Lucy, he said, "I decided I wanted to get rid of them." He knew what he was doing was wrong, but he carried it out anyway. That mix of knowing and choosing shows how lost his mind had become. Michael was charged late in 2001 with 2 counts of first-degree slaying, home invasion, theft, conspiracy, and related offenses. Landon May went to trial first and received the harshest possible sentence. Michael chose a different path. In January 2003, he pleaded guilty to the 2 slayings and agreed to testify against his friends. In return, he was given 2 life terms without any chance of release, plus an extra 20 years for the other charges. The judge accepted his plea on January 27, 2003. Michael gave up his right to a pre-sentence report and did not appeal. His sentence became final on February 26, 2003. In 2012, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that automatic life terms for young offenders were unconstitutional. Michael filed for new hearings under state law. His case was reviewed again and again. In 2017, after another Supreme Court decision made the change retroactive, his case went back to court. The county dropped its push for no parole terms. That November, a judge re-sentenced him to 2 back-to-back terms of 40 years to life, and 80 to life total. Many saw this as almost the same as before. Michael asked for those 2 terms to run at the same time, which would let him apply for release after 35 years. The judge refused. In April 2019, Pennsylvania's Superior Court agreed that a 40 to life term was not the same as no release. Michael's later appeals failed. In June 2025, the state's highest court denied his final request. Up next is $15, a TV, and a lifeless body. Jeffrey Christina was born in 1960. He grew up in Lawrenceville, a neighborhood in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He lacked strong support at home before the age of 16. There's almost no mention of siblings or parents. He did not come into public view until the event that led to his case. On December 10, 1975, Jeffrey was 16 years old. He and a friend, William Perozzi, forced their way into an apartment building. They knocked down the front panel of the entrance. Christina crawled inside and unlocked the main door for Perozzi. He stayed in the small entry area while Perozzi went on to break into the apartment of 83-year-old Frank Slazinski. Slazinski was a retired steelworker. A few minutes later, neighbors found him seriously hurt. He passed away 4 days later from those injuries. Christina said he only stood guard. Perozzi later testified that Christina struck Slazinski more than once with a blackjack, a small club-like weapon. That detail became the key question at the trial. Did Christina only watch, or did he also harm Slazinski? During the break-in, the pair took $15 and a small television. Christina admitted to taking part in the burglary. He denied hurting Slazinski, saying he left before things got worse. Perozzi gave multiple statements saying Christina joined in. The likely motive was simple: opportunistic theft by 2 teenagers looking for quick cash and small electronics. There's no evidence of a deeper plan or long-term need. Christina went on trial in June 1976 at age 17. He faced charges of theft and second-degree homicide. The jury found him guilty on both counts. In 1978, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court upheld the verdicts and confirmed the mandatory life sentence without parole. That sentence changed decades later. In 2012, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that minors could not automatically receive life without parole. This decision applied to cases like Christina's. In December 2016, after nearly 41 years behind bars, his sentence was reduced to 20 years to life. He became eligible for release. On December 3, 2016, at age 58, he walked out of prison. He called that day surreal and hard to believe. His niece Melanie said, "We've waited for this day. We've prayed. Our prayers are finally answered." His brother Tony added, "Since he was put away, family was never the same, but now, there is going to be a family Christmas for a change." Christina himself said, "I'm just going to enjoy life and my family and take things one day at a time." The next looked like a normal teen until the fire alarm rang. Alex Ryle was born on October 1, 1997. He grew up in a regular suburban home in Murraysville, Pennsylvania. His parents and a younger brother lived with him. People who knew them say the household felt stable and caring. His mom and dad took part in community events. Later, his lawyer compared them to a happy TV family. No one ever saw signs of something dark in Alex's mind. At school, Alex was quiet and kept to himself. He did not cause trouble. So how could a normal teen carry out such an act? Alex had felt sad and alone since 5th grade. In high school, he again thought about ending his life. Investigators found his notebook full of worrying notes. One entry, dated April 6, 2014, borrowed from Norse myths. It said he could not wait to see terrified looks when students learned their lives would be taken. He called them plebeians. He meant ordinary people beneath him. He also wrote about Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, who had hurt people at Columbine High School. He planned his incident for Harris's birthday, April 9th. He first chose April 20th, the Columbine anniversary, but switched because it fell on a Sunday. On April 9th, 2014, at about 7:13 a.m., 16-year-old Alex walked into Franklin Regional High School. He carried 2 8-inch kitchen blades. He wore all black. He moved down the hallway outside the science classrooms. Then he began wounding students at random. He pulled the fire alarm to draw more students into the hall. In a few minutes, he injured 20 students and 1 staff member. 4 people were badly hurt, but survived. 1 student needed a liver transplant. Finally, Assistant Principal Sam King and student Ian Griffith confronted Alex and stopped him. Reportedly, Alex then whispered that he wasn't done and planned to hurt more people. No one passed, but the event shocked the town. Why did Alex do this? His diary and phone records showed long planning. He hated ordinary people and felt alone in American society. He wanted the fame that past school targeters got. He was first charged as an adult. The charges listed 21 counts of trying to cause fatal harm and serious harm to others, plus weapons violations. In June 2014, he pleaded not guilty and underwent a mental health review. In September 2014, he spoke in court once. He said, "I'm sorry for committing the incident." Otherwise, he stayed quiet. His lawyers asked to move his case to juvenile court under a mental illness plea. The judge refused. By October 24, 2017, Alex was 20. He admitted guilt on all counts. His family agreed to this plea to spare victims from reliving the event at trial. On January 22, 2018, Judge Christopher Feliciani gave Alex a prison term of 23.5 to 60 years. He also must pay $269,000 in restitution. The judge ordered ongoing mental health care while he is locked up. In May 2020, the state's highest court confirmed this sentence. At sentencing, Alex spoke briefly. "I would rather be in jail getting treatment for mental illness than free without it." That showed how much he struggles inside. The next case all began with a forbidden relationship and a text that couldn't be taken back. Jaime Lynn Silvenek grew up in Orfield, Pennsylvania. She lived with her mother, Cheryl, and her father, David. Cheryl was 54 when she lost her life. David was around but did not take part in what followed. Jaime was in 8th grade. She made honor roll. She had no run-ins with the law. She played the French horn. She walked neighbors' dogs and cat sat. She enjoyed sleepovers with friends. In October 2014, just before her 14th birthday, Jaime went to a teen concert. There she met Caleb Barnes, a 20-year-old soldier. They started texting constantly. Some days they shared dozens of messages. They met late at night in secret. Cheryl found out. She told Jaime the relationship had to end. Jaime begged Cheryl to stay out of her life. Behind her mother's back, Jaime sent Caleb texts like, "I want her gone, and just do it." On March 14th, 2015, Cheryl agreed to drive Jaime and Caleb to another concert in Scranton. She hoped it would help Jaime move on. After the show, they drove home in Cheryl's Ford Freestyle. Cheryl parked in the driveway. Jaime later said she froze. She watched Caleb stand behind her mother. Then he inflicted a fatal injury to Cheryl's neck. Cheryl collapsed in the car. Jaime and Caleb rushed to hide her body. They left the red-soaked car near a pond. In the early hours of March 15th, police found Cheryl's body shallowly buried near Jordan Creek off Hassadal Road. They discovered the Ford Freestyle soon after. Jaime was still home. She first denied everything. Within hours, she admitted she had helped hide the body and the vehicle. She had small scrapes on her fingers, one broken acrylic nail, and a little cut. Those matched her story of fear and hurry. On March 15th, 2015, prosecutors charged Jaime in juvenile court. She faced counts of hindering the finding of evidence, tampering with evidence, and hiding a body. 2 weeks later, they moved all charges to adult court. That included the first degree of ending a life, which ended her juvenile status. In October and November of 2015, a judge held a 2-day hearing. Experts spoke about Jaime's youth. They talked about her love for sleepovers, music, and family. Prosecutors called her manipulative. They described her as someone who seeks control. Supporters asked if she could change in juvenile court. The judge said no. He ruled she wasn't ready for that system. With trial approaching, Jaime made a deal on February 11th, 2016. She pled guilty to first-degree charges. She agreed to serve 35 years to life. In return, prosecutors dropped the other charges, but those would run at the same time anyway. Caleb went on trial 2 days later. A jury convicted him. He said Jaime was the one who harmed her mother. He claimed she did it during an argument about her being pregnant. Jaime testified in her own defense. She cried. She called herself a monster. She said Caleb was the one who acted. Prosecutors said Caleb's story did not match the evidence. No blade was found with his fingerprints. At her sentencing, Jaime spoke last. Her voice shook. She said, "I believe what I did was just as bad or worse than the physical act. I realized that I had to do the right thing. That's taking accountability for my actions." Caleb received life without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 22 to 44 years. Jaime's earliest chance for parole is in 2051. Jaime appealed in 2017. The Superior Court rejected her request to return to juvenile court. In 2022, her team argued her guilty plea was not truly voluntary. They said her lawyer broke Pennsylvania rules by involving the judge too early and by failing to show how young and vulnerable she was. They asked for another look. On January 31st, 2022, a post-conviction relief court denied her motion. In October 2022, the Superior Court agreed. As of today, Jaime remains in prison. Her first review for release will come in 2051. Scott Charles Davis grew up in Springettsbury Township near York, Pennsylvania. He was born around 1965 and lived with his family in a simple suburb. In his mid-teens, he worked for his neighbor, 41-year-old Roderick Cutchin. They became both neighbors and employer-employee. On June 7, 1980, something went terribly wrong. At just 15 years old, Davis picked up a gun and shot Cutchin. Cutchin lost his life in that moment. No clear reason ever emerged. Some say Davis felt afraid. Others think he may have been deeply troubled. We may never know exactly what drove him. After the shooting, Davis stayed calm in town. Police arrested him soon after. Even though he was only 15, state law let them treat him like an adult. His lawyers asked for a move to juvenile court. They pointed to his youth and mental health struggles. A hearing was held on September 30th, 1980. Both sides agreed he had serious mental challenges, but the court decided he did not fit juvenile treatment. On November 10th, 1980, the judge said no. That decision stood again on March 13th, 1981. The court also found he did not qualify for mental health commitment in place of regular court. The trial ran from May 4th to May 7th, 1981. Davis did not claim he was unaware of his actions. He admitted mental illness only to suggest he had limited ability. The jury rejected that. They found him responsible for first-degree intentional harm. He was given a life term with no chance of release. His lawyers appealed, arguing mental health proceedings should have come first. Appeals went all the way to the state's highest court. In July 1984, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said those arguments did not apply because he never entered juvenile proceedings. They ruled that mental health steps could not replace the regular court process. In the end, Davis went to an adult prison. He was still a child in age but treated as an adult offender. He did not receive a special farewell or final statement. No record shows any last words. This case highlights a tough question. When a young person with mental illness harms someone, should they go through mental health treatment first? Or is public safety more important? Here, the courts chose to keep him in the adult system. They decided that treatment did not replace legal responsibility in a serious offense.